At midnight, Trump was ahead 10%, which was an unusually high amount. To about 2 o'clock in the morning, my monitor went down. It totally rebooted. So unless you can tell me there wasn't a data dump, there wasn't a data breach, I don't believe that the numbers were true, because when I went home and woke up, all of a sudden Biden was ahead. We had processed 120,000 votes by midnight out of the 170,000 absentee ballots we were expecting. So I assumed we were missing about 50,000, and all of a sudden Biden was now missing. And Sidney Powell did discuss something about this in Rudy Giuliani's press conference, and I do believe I did witness that. And the voting had stopped in the middle of the night. So unless you were one of the few processing tables, you would not have seen this rebooting of the laptops.
Thank you.
Okay, so President Trump just did something that has Republicans in absolute panic mode right now. And it's not what you think. It's December 2025. He's sitting in the Oval Office. He controls the White House, the Senate, and he's got major wins piling up left and right. And yet, out of nowhere, he just went back to posting about 2020 election fraud. Full-on, aggressive posts. We caught Hillary Clinton. We caught Barack Hussein Obama. Claims of proof. Claims of treason. Claims that accountability is coming. And here's the thing that nobody in mainstream media wants to talk about. This isn't random. This isn't some nostalgic trip down memory lane. This is strategic. This is calculated. And when you understand what Trump is actually doing here, the whole political landscape for 2026 suddenly makes a lot more sense. But you're not going to hear this on CNN or MSNBC, because honestly, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built US Power Alert, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines and understand what's really happening in Washington right now, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We bring the news straight to you every single day. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. And if you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe right now. All right, let's get back to the video.
And I read pretty much what you read. It would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him. And Comey was there. And Clapper, the whole group was there. Brennan, they were all there in a room. Right here, this was the room. This is much more beautiful than it was then, but that's okay. I have nice pictures up. They came out of the vaults. They were in there for 100 years. This is much more beautiful. We have the Declaration of Independence now in the room, which wasn't here. I guess people didn't feel too good about putting it here, but I do. But you know what? If you look at those papers, they have them stone cold, and it was President Obama. It wasn't lots of people all over the place. It was them too. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? And except for the fact that he gets shielded by the press for his entire life, that's the one they... Look, he's guilty. It's not a question. You know, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think of. They tried to steal the election. They tried to obfuscate the election. They did things that nobody's ever even imagined.
Here's what happened. On December 26, 2025, President Trump shared multiple posts on Truth Social revisiting the 2020 election. Not just casual mentions, full accusations. He posted a video compilation that appears to show testimony from what looks like an oversight committee hearing, mixed with clips of him in the Oval Office. The posts claim that evidence has been gathered proving massive fraud in 2020, that specific individuals including Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were caught, and that accountability is finally coming. Trump followers are sharing it like wildfire. MAGA influencers are calling it the beginning of the storm. And Republicans in Congress? They're trying to pretend they didn't see it. Now, here's where this gets interesting. Trump is the sitting president. He won in 2024. He's already in power, so why on earth would he go back to relitigating 2020? He doesn't need to prove he won 2024. Everyone already knows he did. He doesn't need to rally his base for an election that's already over. So what's actually happening here? Let me break this down, because this is where most people get it completely wrong. First, understand the political calendar. We're heading into 2026. Midterm elections. Historically, the party in power loses seats. Republicans know this. Trump knows this. And here's the problem for Trump. He needs his people absolutely fired up heading into those midterms, because if Democrats take back the House, his entire second-term agenda collapses. Investigations start. Impeachment threats come back. His legislative wins grind to a halt. So, Trump needs maximum turnout from his base in November 2026. And what fires up the MAGA base more than anything else? The idea that the entire system is rigged against them. That their enemies are criminals who belong in jail. That this is existential warfare, not just normal.
And even in other countries. You've seen some pretty rough countries. This man has seen some pretty rough countries, but you've never seen anything like it. And we have all of the documents. And from what Tulsi told me, she's got thousands of additional documents coming. So President Obama, it was his concept, his idea, but he also got it from crooked Hillary Clinton. Crooked is a $3 bill. Hillary Clinton and her group, the Democrats, spent $12 million to Christopher Steele to write up a report that was a total fake report. Took 2 years to figure that out, but it came out that it was a total fake report. It was made up fiction. And they used that. Now, the one thing they weren't able to do was to, and probably the only thing I respect about the press in years is the press refused to write it before the election. They refused to put it in. The Steele report was a disaster. All lies, all fabrication, all admitted, an admitted fraud. She paid $12 million, and the Democrats, for that report to a wise guy named Christopher Steele. He wrote a phony report, and they wanted to get that report in before the election. And I'll tell you what, I talk about all the time, the fake news, how bad it is. But in this case, they wouldn't do it. They saw it, they read it, and they said, we don't believe it. And it was only after, substantially, like a month and a half after the election, that it got printed, and it was a big wisp. It was just like a bang of nothing, because the election had ended. If that report had gotten published by the New York Times or somebody, and I respect the Times for maybe only this, because they're crooked as you can be. They're a terrible paper, a crooked, corrupt paper. But for this one moment, they said, this is bullshit, we can't put this in. And neither could any other paper. Wall Street Journal's a lousy paper, very, very dishonest paper. As you see, I'm suing them for a lot of money because they do things very badly. It's got a nice name, but it's really, in my opinion, it's a terrible paper. And it can be corrupt. But just so you know, they didn't take the Steele report. It was the dossier. Remember the famous dossier? I called it the fake news dossier. The news wouldn't publish it. And I'm amazed. They had 2.5 months. It was finished. 2.5 months. That was supposed to be what was going to happen. And it got published a couple of months after the election. And frankly, nobody cared too much about it. But that was a big thing. No, we caught Hillary Clinton. We caught Barack Hussein Obama. They're the ones. And then you have many, many people under them. Susan Rice. They're all there. The names are all there. And I guess they figured they're going to put this in classified information and nobody will ever see it again. But it doesn't work that way. And it's the most unbelievable thing I think I've ever read. So you ought to take a look at that and stop talking about nonsense.
Politics. Second, this is about control of the narrative. Right now, Trump is dealing with some serious institutional pushback. Federal judges are blocking parts of his immigration agenda. Some of his cabinet picks are facing tough confirmation fights. A few Republican senators are getting wobbly on certain policies. There's international pressure over tariffs. Allies are pushing back on some of his foreign policy moves. So what does Trump do when he's facing resistance? He changes the subject. He creates a bigger, more dramatic story that completely dominates the news cycle. Instead of talking about court losses or Senate fights, now everyone's talking about whether Trump is actually going to prosecute Obama and Hillary. It's classic Trump media strategy. Flood the zone. Control the conversation. Make your problems disappear by creating a bigger spectacle. Third, and this is crucial, this is about intimidation. Trump isn't just talking to his base here. He's sending a message to everyone in Washington. Democrats, obviously. but also Republicans who might be thinking about distancing themselves from him. The message is simple. I will never let go. I will never move on. I will keep fighting these battles forever, and if you cross me, I will make your life absolute hell. It's a warning shot. It's Trump saying that anyone who opposes him isn't just a political opponent. They're potentially a criminal who will face investigation and prosecution. And you better believe that every Republican senator who was thinking about voting against one of Trump's nominees just got that message loud and clear. Fourth, there's the legal strategy angle, and this is where things get really dark. Multiple people in Trump's orbit are facing various legal challenges. Some are dealing with January 6th related cases. Some are dealing with documents issues. Some are dealing with state-level investigations. And here's what Trump does in these situations. He tries to reframe everything as political persecution. By going back to 2020 and claiming that the real criminals are Obama and Hillary, he's setting up a narrative where any prosecution of anyone in his world is just partisan revenge. He's creating a permission structure for his Justice Department to go after his enemies, while simultaneously arguing that any action against his people is illegitimate. It's a legal and political shield wrapped in conspiracy theory packaging. And fifth, this could be about setting up a crisis for 2026 and beyond. Here's the nightmare scenario that some people in Washington are quietly terrifying themselves over. What if Trump is laying the groundwork to challenge future elections? What if he's normalizing the idea that elections can't be trusted, that fraud is everywhere, that the only legitimate outcome is one where he or his allies win? Because if he can convince enough people that 2020 was stolen, then every future election becomes contestable. Every loss becomes evidence of fraud. Every victory by Democrats becomes proof of a rigged system. And that's not politics anymore. That's the end of democratic norms as we know them. Now, let's talk about how different groups are reacting to this, because the responses tell you everything you need to know about where American politics is right now. MAGA world is absolutely ecstatic. They see this as Trump finally keeping his promise to drain the swamp. They believe that prosecutions are actually coming. They think Hillary and Obama are about to face real consequences. Trump allies in Congress are echoing the message, some more cautiously than others. They're talking about investigations. They're promising hearings. They're suggesting that evidence will be revealed. Whether they actually believe it, or whether they're just playing to the base, is irrelevant at this point, because the political effect is the same either way. Establishment Republicans, on the other hand, are in full damage control mode. Privately, they're horrified. They know this makes the party look insane to swing voters. They know this undermines confidence in elections, which is a huge problem when you're trying to win elections. They know this gives Democrats massive ammunition for 2026, but publicly, most of them are silent. A few will give vague statements about moving forward or focusing on the future, but they won't directly contradict Trump. They can't. Their voters love this stuff. If they push back too hard, they'll get primaried, so they're stuck. They have to watch Trump burn down democratic norms, while they smile nervously and hope it doesn't destroy them in the midterms. Democrats are using this as Exhibit A in their argument that Trump is a threat to democracy. They're fundraising off it. They're running ads about it. They're pointing to it as proof that Trump never accepted the 2020 results and never will. And you know what? It's working. Independent voters who were maybe willing to give Trump a second chance are looking at this and thinking, wait, we're still doing this? It's been 5 years. He won in 2024. Why are we still talking about 2020? This is exactly the kind of thing that turns suburban moderates away from Republicans. And Democrats know it. They want Trump talking about 2020 fraud as much as possible. Because every day he's doing that is a day he's not talking about the economy or immigration or issues where he might actually have an advantage. International allies are watching this with a mix of confusion and alarm. European leaders are already nervous about Trump's unpredictability on NATO and Ukraine. They're worried about his tariff threats. They're concerned about his approach to China. And now they're seeing the sitting president of the United States claiming that his predecessor committed treason and needs to be prosecuted. That's not normal. That doesn't happen in stable democracies. That's the kind of thing you see in countries with serious institutional problems. So America's credibility as a stable partner is taking another hit. Allies are asking themselves, Can we really rely on a country where every election is treated as potentially fraudulent? Can we trust a president who seems more focused on settling old scores than governing? Now let's talk about what this means legally and institutionally, because this is where things could get genuinely dangerous. Trump controls the Justice Department. He appointed the Attorney General. He has enormous influence over federal law enforcement. So when he says accountability is coming, he's not just talking. He actually has the power to order investigations. He can direct prosecutors to look into Obama-era officials. He can declassify documents. He can create special counsels. And here's the terrifying part. Even if there's no actual evidence of wrongdoing, the process itself is the punishment. Investigations destroy reputations. Legal fees bankrupt people. Even if you're eventually cleared, your life has been turned upside down for years. That's what Trump is threatening here. And every single person who ever crossed him knows it. This also sets an incredibly dangerous precedent for American democracy. If sitting presidents can use the Justice Department to prosecute their political opponents based on conspiracy theories and partisan grievances, then we're no longer a democracy with rule of law. We're a country where elections determine who gets to weaponize the legal system against their enemies. And that's not sustainable. Because what happens when Democrats eventually win again? Do they then prosecute Trump officials? Does it become an endless cycle of revenge prosecutions? Because once you cross that line, you can't go back. Once you establish that it's okay to use law enforcement as a political weapon, every future administration will do the same thing. And at that point, we're not the United States anymore. We're something much uglier. There's also a massive risk that Trump is underestimating here, which is that most Americans actually do want to move on. Polling consistently shows that voters care about inflation, healthcare, jobs, immigration, and security. They don't care about litigating elections from 5 years ago. They definitely don't care about prosecuting Barack Obama for imaginary crimes. So every day Trump spends on this is a day he's not delivering for voters on the issues they actually care about. And Republicans who are paying attention know that this is a political disaster waiting to happen. Because when Democrats run ads in 2026 showing Trump talking about 2020 fraud while gas prices are high and grocery costs are insane, it's not going to play well with the swing voters who decide elections. The media coverage of this is also fascinating, because it reveals how broken our information ecosystem actually is. Right-wing media is treating this as a major vindication. They're running headlines like "Trump promises justice finally coming" and "Obama administration crimes exposed." They're presenting this as if real evidence exists and prosecutions are imminent. Left-wing media is treating this as further proof that Trump is an authoritarian who won't accept election results. They're running headlines about threats to democracy and erosion of norms. And mainstream media is somewhere in the middle, trying to fact-check the claims, while also treating it as a legitimate political story. But here's the problem. None of this actually moves anyone. People who believe Trump already believed this stuff. People who opposed Trump already thought he was dangerous. And the few people in the middle are just exhausted by all of it. So here's what we should actually be watching for over the next few weeks and months, because this story is far from over. First, watch what Trump's Justice Department actually does. Are they opening investigations into Obama-era officials? Are they declassifying documents? Are they creating special counsels? Because if they actually move forward with this, that's a massive escalation. That's not just rhetoric anymore. That's the full weaponization of federal law enforcement for political revenge. And if that happens, we're in uncharted territory as a country. Second, watch how congressional Republicans react. Do they support these investigations? Do they hold hearings? Do they subpoena witnesses? Or do they try to quietly distance themselves while hoping the whole thing blows over? Because if Republican senators and House members start enabling this, it means they've completely abandoned any pretense of normal governance. It means they're all in on the revenge narrative. And that tells you everything you need to know about where the party is heading. Third, watch the polls. Is this actually energizing Trump's base, or is it turning off the moderate voters he needs for 2026? Because if Trump's approval numbers start dropping, if Republicans start underperforming in special elections, if swing state polling turns against them, then this whole strategy backfires. And if that happens, you might see some Republicans start to break away. Not publicly, not dramatically, but in quiet ways that undermine Trump's agenda. Fourth, watch what Democrats do with this. Are they using it effectively in fundraising and messaging? Are they able to turn this into a clear argument about why voters should give them back the House in 2026? Because Democrats have been pretty terrible at political messaging for years, but this is such an obvious gift that even they should be able to use it effectively. If they can't turn "Trump is still obsessing over 2020 while your bills are piling up" into a winning message, then they deserve to lose. And fifth, watch the international reaction. Are allies distancing themselves? Are they hedging their bets? Are they making contingency plans for an America that might not be a reliable partner? Because every time Trump does something like this, it chips away at American credibility. And at some point, that credibility is so damaged that it can't be rebuilt, even when a different president takes office. That's the long-term cost of this kind of behavior, and it's one that Americans will be paying for decades. So here's the bottom line. Trump going back to 2020 election fraud claims in December 2025 isn't nostalgia. It's not Trump being unable to let go. It's strategic. It's about firing up his base for 2026. It's about controlling the media narrative. It's about intimidating opponents. It's about setting up a legal and political framework where any challenge to Trump or his allies can be dismissed as partisan persecution. And it's about normalizing the idea that elections can't be trusted, which is maybe the most dangerous part of all. This reveals everything you need to know about Trump's political strategy going forward. He doesn't care about norms. He doesn't care about institutions. He doesn't care about America's reputation abroad. He cares about power, and he cares about revenge, and he's willing to burn down whatever he needs to burn down to get both. Whether that strategy works is going to depend on how Republicans in Congress react, how voters respond, and whether Democrats can actually capitalize on what should be an enormous political gift. But make no mistake, this is a defining moment. This is where we find out whether American democracy can survive a president who refuses to accept the legitimacy of elections he doesn't win, who threatens to prosecute his opponents based on conspiracy theories, and who treats the Justice Department as his personal weapon. We're watching history happen in real time, and how this plays out over the next year is going to determine what kind of country we are for the next generation. So keep your eyes on this. Watch what happens next. Watch who stands up and who stays silent, because those choices are going to matter in ways we can't even fully understand yet. This story is far from over, and the stakes could not possibly be higher.